expired. Senator Cornyn's next.
Thank you, Governor, for being willing to take on this challenge. If your job is to make sure the trains are running on time, do you think it's important for us to make sure that there's something in those cars? In other words, Senator Grassley broached the topic of solvency of Social Security. According to published reports, Social Security will become insolvent by 2033 unless Congress does something different. Medicare will become insolvent by 2031. Just to cover a few facts with you, I'm sure you're aware of all of this. Right now, our debt to GDP ratio is 100%. We spend $659 billion so far this year just on interest on the debt. $659 billion just to pay interest to the bondholders in China and Japan and elsewhere around the world. As you know, mandatory spending, which includes Social Security and Medicare, roughly is 2/3 of all federal spending. So that contributes disproportionately to the debt that I mentioned just a moment ago. Try as we may, trying to deal with this strictly in discretionary spending, which is 1/3 of that spending, including the 8% that's spent just on interest alone. We can't get there, get to a balance dealing with just with discretionary spending. Obviously, our goal should be to save Social Security and Medicare and not cut it. You've been in politics a while. You understand what a political football this can be. But at some point, it seems to me that people in politics need to have the courage to speak the truth about where we are and what direction we are heading when it comes to federal spending. Right now, we are debating a supplemental appropriation bill. The House is for Israel to help them defend their country against terrorists known as Hamas. We know the president has also requested money for Ukraine, total of, I think, $106 billion in supplemental appropriation requests. The president also sent us another $50 billion domestic supplemental as well. I think you can tell the direction I'm heading here, the gist of my concerns, but unless we do something different than we have been doing, we are heading toward a disaster for the seniors that depend on Social Security and Medicare, and a disaster for our country because we won't have the financial ability to actually deal with emergencies like what's happening in Israel, what's happening in Ukraine, and other places around the world. So do you agree with me that we're heading in a bad direction?
I believe the world only spins forward, and I'm an optimist, Senator. I believe that if I can address directly the Social Security aspect, I think there's some interesting things. Senator Cardin will recall the Medicare waiver that we arranged for the state of Maryland. We stopped paying the hospitals as if they were the Marriott Hotel by how many beds they could fill up, and we've saved the federal government $1 billion. But to your question about Social Security, this is the beauty of Social Security, that it is a currently funded system. In other words, when people work, they pay into it. A reserve has been built up, and those dollars are dedicated there. And if you were to look at GDP and Social Security as percentage of GDP, it's pretty much clipped along at like the 4%-ish, and is not seeing those sharp spikes, that kind of hockey stick movement that you allude to where healthcare is concerned.
Well, is it your understanding that current benefits to Social Security recipients are paid out of the trust fund, or are those financial transactions on the balance sheet of the federal government that essentially add to the national debt?
No, it's my position that it is paid by people paying into it. In other words, last year, Social Security paid out $1.24 trillion. They brought in $1.22 trillion, and then the reserve that had been built up is $2.83 trillion. So they had to tap that to make up that difference. As people anticipated in 1983 when they created some changes to extend solvency.
Do you know what the administration's plan is to save Social Security?
No, sir.
Did you talk to the president or any of his advisors about that in your discussions with him about this nomination?
Not yet, but I did read and I followed what he said in his presidential campaign. And
what did you say in your presidential campaign about Social Security?
I said,
No, the time of my colleague has expired, and as we said,
I think he was getting ready to answer my question.
yeah, I said similar things.
great.
And it's in that, and Senator, I submitted, I'm not trying to be coy. I mean, it's in the Senate Finance Questionnaire. One of the wonderful questions they ask of somebody that's run for office is, give us everything you've ever published or said online for since you've been out of college. So I do have my position, and I highlighted that one at, the first 20 pages that were on that Senate Finance Committee. But I do have my position there, and the president's pretty well known, I think, on his position on solvency.
The time of my colleague has expired. I would just say to colleagues on both sides of the aisle, there was a reason that I asked the first question the way I asked it, because this is not a position where you're supposed to do politics. You're supposed to do service. And
You
whether
said
it's overpayments-
politics? Were you suggesting my questions had to do with politics
I'm
as
not
opposed to policy?
I'm not saying anything other than there was a reason I asked my question the way I
Well,
did.
Mr.
and
Chairman,
was
I don't
pleased.
accept the fact that you try to censor members of the Senate
didn't censor-
asking questions of witnesses in a nomination
Not
hearing.
only did I not censor
I was
my
trying to be
colleague,
respectful of the governor, and I'm confident he will do a good job. I just hope still has a trust fund to administer.
not only did I not